Okay, perception concept in user interface design. The presentation is split in two parts. The first part is about our brain, how it works, our systems of visions, and walking through video games, and our two different topics. The second part is about the screen, and while the first part is theoretical and really ideal, the second part deals with concrete laws and concrete rules on the concept behind behind the screen, what is the thought that you have to present something, the geometry that these things has, and the colors that the interface has. I won't talk the part of the human relation with the computer, with the mouse, or gestural activity, or something that is totally another topic. A little disclaimer, so if you don't understand some of my sentence, please tell me. It won't be an exhaustive talk, it's just some pills of this wide topic. Is not only Blender oriented, but this can be used for any interface, and is not actual Blender oriented, means that Blender can have a more development that is not covered now. I will be sure being repetitive because a lot of you may just know some of the concept I express. I will only try to put it in an organized and a structural way. Okay, let's begin with the brain, the first concept. I will start very far with the story of wife and his husband, Dee and Carlo. Dee is an English girl that married Carlo and went to live in the north of Italy. They live in mountains, and one day happened a tragic accident. So Dee was intoxicated by carbon monoxide, but Carlo suddenly came in the house and rescued her. And this Dee was after analyzed by two people from England, two doctors, and so these doctors meet her in their studio. She walked up the stairs, she presented her to the doctors, and they talked for some hours. They did tests, and everything was quite normal, except that she was blind. How can be that she can make stairs and all the things being blind? And so how unfortunately often happens, some bad things lead to good research point. And so she has been blind in a way that we are blind looking at this. We recognize the shape, we can copy it, but we absolutely don't understand what is this. Nobody knows what this means. And she had one part of the brain that was dead, and she didn't at all recognize any shapes. So it didn't recognize the face, it didn't recognize the orientation of the things, but she could do all the activities normally involved with vision, so walk, doing steps, taking things, and all the things. And she recognized the doctors and other people by the color of the dress, by the voice, and using other senses. The conclusion is that while it has been studied a lot of things about our vision, the eye's anatomy, the creation of the image on the retina, the transmission, the neural connection, and all this stuff. There's something new here, and that we don't have one system of vision, but we have two or more systems of vision, totally independent, one building on the others. So we have these two kinds of vision. The first kind of vision, what was that in D, is the vision of perception. The vision of perception is what we use to read, is what we use to recognize complex drawings and allow us to plan, is what animals has really thin development on this. And this analysis of the drawings can be indefinitely long, so we can study a drawing for 2 or 3 days. And it is blended with all the previous memory we have in the mind. The second system of vision, that is called vision for action, was perfectly intact in D, so she could act, and so she could take this or take this without any doubt, just because it uses another part of the brain. What has to deal with user interface design is that we can manage to split the contents of our interface using this part of the brain or the other part of the brain. If we have to recognize one shape, it can be very complex, it can be descriptive, it can be difficult to understand, and we can have another part of the interface that is built on system of action that is really quick, is milliseconds time delay, and recognize easy shapes, easy colors, and easy parts. So, for example, a really example of what is vision of action recognized is the basic shapes. Triangles, circles, rectangles, colored in different manners. These pass through the brain and go directly to the vision of action. And we don't even put in conscious this action that we are doing. Okay, now is the second part, is working through video games. Normally, software are categorized in two parts. Vertical software, that is really target, so economy software that deals only with taxes or CAD, and horizontal software, so it's a general purpose. I can write on a text editor about law, about chair design, about architecture, and so it's general purpose. Video games does not belong in any of these two categorization because they don't produce. Then there is another categorization that was it's more recent, that is about input or output. There are user input software that is like Word or Excel or Writer, Impress. And other categorization is that software that you don't put nothing in, but you just receive some output. So rather, you don't do nothing and pling, pling, you have the output. Video games are a mixed activity, so doesn't belong really on this. Then a recent law on ergonomics of human system interaction divides software in these by these three words: efficacy, efficiency, and satisfaction. Of course, business application, like any commercial software, has to have a high amount of efficiency, but maybe they have a low level of satisfaction because you don't really want to play with it in the evening when you come back to work. And but video games, they have a high rate of satisfaction. And why is satisfaction is important? because when you have satisfaction, you have whole your body is stimulated to use it and to maintain attention. And these four words: immersion, stimulation, challenge, sensation. So you are really happy to use it. And high learning curves are the words that characterize satisfaction. And high learning curves is what really belongs to video games. Every child that uses some PlayStation, Wii or something, never read the book how to use it. He just put in, and the learning curve is really high. And so, putting some satisfaction in our interface or in our programs can raise the level of attention and the satisfaction of the users. But how to provide this, and how know how much what we propose is appropriate. This is a little parenthesis on about immersion, that is a state between boredom and stress. So, challenge, concentration. You can concentrate for a long time on a program without having distraction. You know exactly what to do, so the target is clear. You have real-time feedback on action. What you do is a clear link on what you receive and the performance. And you forget, of course, everyday problems, physical needs. You don't eat anymore. You just continue working and working, and you forget about time. And so in the evening, oh, it's late, I have to go to bed. Okay, how do we see what brain is doing? Okay, we can have functional magnetic resonance imaging. We may use electroencephalography, or we use magnetoencephalography and all this stuff. But it's not really what we can do, because nobody likes to have a lot of things in the head, and some doctor that watch you doing some stuff. Also, if it is it has been used, is not really what we can do. There's a nice way to do it is by using ocular movements. Ocular movements is like basically a camera that focuses on your pupil and see what how is working in the screen, and records the mouse movement and pupil diameter. So by this we can know how users search for information. So where the eyes is going to look for determinate things that, and the mouse is following the eyes. How information are treated, so what came first and what came after. The attention rate, the workload, I will explain later, but it's basically how much effort you need to perform an action. And the emotional load. The emotional load is seen by the pupil diameter. How much the pupil is big, and more you are emotionally involved. A lot of parts of the interface design has inference with previous knowledge of the world. So, in fact, there is emotion when you use a program. The pupil diameter changes normally because of the light, but being in front of computer, there's no light changes. So this is directly linked with the emotional load. And the emotional load is directly linked with attention. If you have a lot of involvement using the program, you won't be distracted. And there is also a different, you can know how expert is the user by looking at pupils. So the emotional load is quite constant and quite high for expert user. They know where to go, so they don't have surprises or unclear parts. But newbies have high peaks of attention and high peaks of emotion. To be clear, what this ocular movement is. I will try to show you a video. Okay, this is the interface of our website, and okay, this is the part of the eyes in the website. So he wants to buy a frigo, and he's looking in this website where to find what he needs. The part is the movement, and how much is big this blue. We can replay. This blue is the time that he focuses on a special part of the screen. I'm sorry, this is a really short video, but I could not show bigger video about a graphic program because I'm not be allowed to do it. And it's really clear when people use Photoshop. I saw half an hour video about this, and it's really clear what the user is looking for and what is his attention rate. Okay, we can begin from here. Okay, so the conclusion of this is that the interface has to be cool. And what does it mean? It means that has to deal with fashion. Means that each time to time the fashion of the people changes, and a little bit interface is influenced by this. And there is a lot of words that can be applied to this. Distribution, how things are distributed in the screen. And then there is colors. Affordance. Affordance is that you have that you need the perception of the action you can do with control. If you have to grab it, if you have to slide it, if you have to rotate. The simplicity, then I put two rules that are quite old, Fibonacci number and golden ratio. If you think that these are quite old-fashioned rules, I discovered the things here that my new laptop has the screen. In possession. Schermo. Okay. The standard resolution is that. I don't know if somebody knows how much is the golden ratio. Is 1.6. So if I do 1440 divided 900, I got 1.6. So this laptop was built on golden ratio, and iPod is all built on golden ratio. So it's a really actual way of dealing with geometry, for example. I'm sorry, I'm a little quick on explaining this, but a lot of slides. Okay, the second part is the part really practical, and deals with the screen. And I will express some concepts with some keywords on the and quite quick. Coherence is to express similar part in similar way. Is what is behind the screen, and you have to perfectly know what you want to express, and you have to put some rules. So all of these things are done in this way, and you have to respect the law, or the user will be lost because he believes something has to work in that way because in the other parts of the program it works that way, and if you find something that you believe is not working that way, it raises the distraction of the user. And there are 4 kinds of aesthetic there are four kinds of coherence. The first is aesthetic coherence. So, for example, I put two logos. One is Mercedes. You have Mercedes logo that is just aesthetic. It doesn't mean of a function. It's a logo. So you have it on the car, on the brochure, in the website, in the advertising. And Blender did with the new website absolutely well, because you may find this Blender logo on the top left of the website, and in the top left of the program, and in the top left of the console if you're using it. This is aesthetic coherence. Functional. My old stereo has a button play, has a button stop, forward, rewind, and his coherence is that it has been used worldwide to represent the same behavior. So play is always play, and you can use it. You can find it in the iPod, and play, stop, go on, go back. And nice things here is that it's been totally and globally moved in the interface of audio programs. So Audacity has got the same identical button. A user won't have a gap switching from his stereo to Audacity. He will perfectly know, and he won't get any error pressing play. And then there is a little the Blender play button. There's no Blender play button, so is something that I wanted to put here like a piece. Okay, internal coherence is, for example, the street signals are an internal coherence of a system. And we can have internal coherence switching from Blender, for example, to the wiki of Blender. In the wiki, in some parts, there's the copy of the command. If you can see, object mode is in the text. So there's no gap, again, between what is in the program and what is in the wiki, or can be in other parts. External coherence is about interface design, is about dealing with more programs. So import-export have a standard files as a standard document is external coherence. For example, to choose that one program has the same shortcut as another programs. For example, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, or Apple-C, Apple-V, is worldwide known, and this is external coherence. In Blender can be maybe using the same shortcut of Inkscape, or Inkscape using the same of Blender. You won't have any gap between those programs. Another term is workload, what we saw before. There are two kinds of workload. That is cognitive or physical. The cognitive workload is the amount of mental activity you need to perform an action, the perception, the memory, and the concentration. The physical workload is the amount of physical activity. Using a computer, there's not much physical activity to do. It's just moving the mouse, so it's not too much. So it's not really to deal with force, but maybe has to deal with repetition. So doing for 100 times the same action involve a physical workload. And workload is proportional with errors. So if you have a high cognitive workload, it may happen that there is a lot of errors. To avoid a high cognitive workload is to graphicalize. So put everything you can in graphic, because there are two kinds of memory, the remind memory and the recognizing memory. If you have to think to a command and write a command, is more stressing that recognize a command between a list and to use this program and to use this command. Then there is the rule of 80-20. So use it to build the menu. On big numbers, a lot of causes are provoked by few causes. So the 80% of time we use the same 20% of commands. And that's why we have a few icons on on here, for example. We have a few icons. We don't have all the commands are expressed in the menu, and this is done by these rules. So you have to check what commands are more used and put in evidence. Then there is usability versus flexibility. It's really, really easy to use the command, the remote command on your left, and it's more complicated to use the command on your right. And you always have to deal with parts of the interface or where to put in between the interface. So you may use tricks to deal with these, but normally usability is when you have a wide audience and maybe some non-expert people are using it, and you maybe want to change again the program and you don't know in which direction it will go, so you just put simple rules. Or if you have a mature program and you want to deal with mature users, you use the command on the right that has a huge amount of command, and you can do a lot of things. Of course, you have to choose where to put in between, but there is a lot of way to deal with this. I stole the remote program of my parents, and this is more like the command easy command, but if you want more expert, you are more expert, you can open it, and there is a lot of commands inside. This is what we have with menus, and this is called chunking, so put together information and allow user to view them only when they need it. And two laws that are used to distribute the icons and the menu on the screen. This is the fit law that is used also in reality to build the car command and to know where the pedals are. And this is the time to reach a target is determined by distance and dimension. More is far, more you need workload, mental workload to reach it. Also, if the physical workload is not too much, to move the mouse from one side of the screen and the other. And more is little, more is difficult. If you have a big icon really closer to your mouse, then it's easy to reach it. And if it's really far, it's more difficult. The law applies on pointing action, and the rule is at big near controls for frequent use. This is not the only two rules that deal with this, but there are a lot of tricks that are used to reduce the time. And for example, the use of constraints. I will show you a constraint. This is a vertical constraint. So I don't deal with horizontal movement of the mouse. I can put my mouse anywhere on the screen, and I just do vertical movements. This reduces workload and reduce activity in the hand to deal with it. And another constraint are the limits of the screen. So if I go up here, also if I don't reach the X, I can close the program. And also here is the limit of the screen that gives me the target. So I just move on the bottom and on my left, and I reach the target. And in fact, in the old version of Windows, there was a non-active pixel here that provoked a lot of click in vain because it didn't reach the start menu. Okay, it's this. Another law is X law that say that more you have alternatives and more you have time, more you will need thinking time. But this time is not linear, so it's not that if you have two choices, three choices has not the same linear time to think on it, and this is why we split menu. And normal, the maximum of lines on a menu is 10, and there's a book that is called The Magic Number 7 plus minus 2 that deals with the quick memory, and it says that normally people remember a list of 7 objects if you are not experienced on using it, and may vary from 5 to 9. And this applies to linear action-reaction situation only, so if you have to think or to read, it does not apply this law. I will upload this presentation on the internet. In the note, you may find the bibliography of these laws. And about Fitts law, I put the law that is really clear, is quite easy to determine the amount of time you need to click on it. But I didn't put the Ick law because it's a very tricky law and may lead to unwanted results if it's not really carefully balanced. Okay, the last topic is about confirmation, tolerances, and errors. The first is confirmation, that is what is before the error. So you want to avoid unintentional action, like to quit the program without setting, to overwrite files. And you normally avoid this using dialog windows. So when you want to erase something, the system asks you, are you sure about it? And you need more steps to perform an action. You have to make this action complicated, and so you cannot push without conscious a button that may lead to unwanted results. So enter a password, re-enter the password. And here I wrote nuclear bomb control. If you think to Tom Cruise and his jet and you want to release a bomb, he cannot push directly the button on the cloche, but he has to remove a cover and then push. And this cover is what is in between, is a confirmation about this action. Are you sure of what you are doing? And then there are a lot of confirmation that maybe has to, in reality, has to deal with more people or with complicated action. So it's not just push, but it's push and rotate, or more people has to push more buttons that are far, so one people cannot do it alone. Then tolerances. After you did the error, what you can do to restore the system as it was. So undo is for a user error. You mistype a command and you are afraid what you did, and you just undo. And then there is auto backup and time backup. There are two different backup. Auto backup is when user doesn't save, and time backup is maybe when there is a system crash. Here, for example, in the email, you can undo the erasing of the file, and if you erase it, you find it in the trash. So it's a double tolerance. Then there is errors that are often design errors, and that it can be or oversight. that are caused by lack of attention, unintentional unconscious, and changes during routine operation. In reality, an oversight is when you have a girlfriend and you always call to this girlfriend, but then you change girlfriend and you type the numbers of your previous girlfriend. This is an oversight. You are not thinking about this, this is unconscious. Or maybe when you have a huge amount of files open and you modify just one, and you close and you say don't save. You close and you say don't save. Then you are in the right files and you say close and you say don't save. This is an oversight. The error comes often when you are tired and are conscious and are knowledge lack. So you don't know what is this command and you press because you believe is the right command. To avoid oversight is control function accessibility. So if they are far and difficult to reach, it's more difficult that you fall into an oversight. And break the action, so you have to rethink about what you're doing another time, and use constraints. And to avoid error, and is to reduce stress. If you are less tired, you won't do so many errors. Repeat danger message, so pay attention what you are doing. This is a tricky command, and multiple confirmation. Then colors. Colors generate inference on a lot of things with previously is colors generate interference of a lot of previous things that are just in our head. So in colors has some significance in our culture and in our life, and so we. But because it deals with culture and other things, we cannot rely totally on colors. Can be different in different culture, and if a dangerous command, some people may have some trouble seeing colors, so maybe colorblind. And another things dealing with color is saturation. When to use pure colors and when to use desaturated colors. If you are dealing with material, for example, or texture, you won't have any distraction. So the background is likely gray or desaturated colors because that won't interfere with the main colors you are seeing. And then colors may interfere with shape of text. I put this sign. This is the sign that appeared in some traffic light controls. The arrows is known as moving stuff. So you may use the arrow with the green color, not with the red color. Red color means stop and arrow means go. And a lot of people had accident because in the traffic light, well, all the three colors, green, orange and red, with the arrow drawing on it. And then some way to find color association. This is contiguous color, so colors that are really close, as in shell. Complementary colors, so the opposite colors in the color circle. Or other series suggested by square and rectangles inscribed in the circle. Okay, this is the end. This is a little piece of theory. Doing it is really harder, but okay. If I have a for the moment, from here, but
after the conference, for example.
I don't know. I have still to upload somewhere. And a guy before came here how to fix the presentation issue with the images, if he can come back to tell me. But I think he's not here. Okay, I will look for it.
Thanks for your presentation. So your Blender conference, do you have any tips to improve the Blender interface, or what's good or what's bad?
Yeah, this is not an easy question.
You don't dare! I can't reach.
No, as you may notice, I didn't talk too much because it's really and you need before maybe a team which analyze the problems and really carefully go in the deep of the problems, and then you have to propose some changes that can be I don't know, radical if you plan to switch to a totally different interface, or maybe done step by step. But now saying something would be really difficult. In general, I think that the base of an idea of a Blender conference is great and is actual. What is done in the years is to put something up and up and up that maybe doesn't follow perfect the basic rules, but this is normal in a program that is so huge, and a lot of other programs I saw as a really messy interface, not only drawing programs but other things, and I saw a clear interface only in the new built-in programs. So they just do one day and they follow the rule all the day and that's it. But with the time, it's obvious that the interface become huge. And
so do you plan to do an eye tracking? You have shown us some examples on Blender interface. Is it complicated? Which software can be used?
Okay, there are some particular studios that do eye tracking, and I don't know any software that we may use, because there's some users has to like make a training before, so the camera focuses on the pupil, and it may be really useful. I think that maybe it can be done after some modification. So after a deep analysis, you say, okay, this I just know it won't be here, or it will be different. You do some proposal and then you eye track. And there is some studios that do this, only this. So and I saw the results, but not the doing of it. So I don't know really how to do it. I wrote about it, but set up a nice tracking system is not hard.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's helpful, but I come from 2D world, like Photoshop, Illustrator and all the stuff, and used Blender since 2 months. And in the beginning it was really like, oh, I don't understand anything. But if you work a lot of time in Blender, you see day by day that it's beautiful, because you can customize everything. And that's the big difference between other products and Blender. That's the impression I have. So I'm not a friend of putting a button for everything you can do on the left and the right. If there will be, I don't know, a beginner version of Blender for totally new users, to help them to step into the world of Blender, to me that could be a great idea. But I think the interface is just brilliant. If you use it day by day, you see, wow, it can't be better. I mean, to me now.
It also has been, some parts of the Blender interface has been copied by other commercial programs, because the fact that any window can be any window, it's great. just yesterday, talking with Italian friends, we thought about a newbie window welcome user with the main command, in which the last command is how to close the newbie window. So after you are not a newbie anymore, you just close it and it's okay. But also for this, there are some parts, of course, the windows that are, as to say, it has been covered by a really new program, and so it's still actual, and some parts are maybe not, but
Are you doing such tests at your university for interfaces, like measuring eye and stress and GPUs? Is that your own research, or?
I'm doing this for thesis at Politecnico di Torino, and I'm in contact because I went to a conference. It's called Frontier of Interaction, in which I knew an engineer, ergonomic engineer of Milan, that she's doing this. So she provided me this little video of the eye tracking, and I'm in contact with her. For the moment, there is no plan for it, but it can be set up to do.
But the whole topic of interface design is still so new that there's no definite answer about like how do you measure scientifically, without opinion, but you want to measure how efficient is an interface. And there's no good answer for that. There are a couple of laws, but the laws are also a bit sometimes contradicting.
Yes.
So, but if you could find at your university like a measuring way, that you could say, okay, here's Maya, there's 3D Studio, there's Blender, there's Lightwave, I'm going to do some tests with users, and then you can measure the effectiveness of the tool. That would be really nice.
Yes, you have to find really skilled users for each program you measure, and to find a newbie there's no problem, and then you may.
Wouldn't that be funny to see the amount of stretch difference and graphs? Like, okay, you ask an experienced Blender user to model something, and the same thing you ask a Maya person, and you try to grab the graphs for where the stretch coming, and then what is going easy, what is quick.
Normally it's done by copying an object. So you give an object, the mobile, okay, do the mobile. And so everybody has the same target.
This is more an opinion than a question, but would you agree maybe? I'm thinking a lot about operating systems and the stuff you said, so I'm very interested. And I'm a Mac user, and I'm very passionate about Mac OS X, for example. And when I talk to my friends who use PCs, sometimes they tell me they don't see a difference. And I go, what? I don't believe it. And the guy who uses a PC, one of my best friends, he's like a scientist, a physicist. So for him, shapes and colors don't mean so much. He looks at numbers, he thinks differently than me. So my theory is that Mac users tend, for example, to be right-brain persons, and PC users left-brain persons. So, well, not everyone, but like in general. So my impression would be that there can't be a perfect interface for everyone. Because, would you agree with that?
No, the perfect interface is like the perfect drawing. So it can be this for one target and that for another target, and also it depends. For example, Blender is a wide program, so for maybe it's correct to draw movie map is correct this kind of thinking, but it's not correct for maybe mesh modeling, and so you have to deal with coherence. So switching from one another, you need to apply the same rules, also if they are not the best. So it's just something, a choice. And then I think that also if you don't notice that and you look at numbers, you are deeply influenced on how numbers are on the screen. So if you are disposed in column, if they follow other rules, maybe you are attracted to see some pattern in numbers that maybe if they are put it in another way, you won't see, you won't notice. So maybe you are not conscious of this process, but it can be. There's someone who says that some of American vote for the president was influenced by how the paper of voting on how the names of the candidates were in the list, because it was not so clear, and so they say that a lot of people missed the right president because of the how the paper was done. They were not conscious about this, but maybe they were influenced. Other question?
Did you read the book of Jeff Raskin, Human Interface? You know that? Jeff Raskin, I didn't the title. Very nice.
Of
Because
course.
you read the design of the Macintosh. And he has a couple of rules which is very radical, but it's very close to what Blender actually does too. And the main rule is that non-modal modality is forbidden in his perspective. And modal means, for example, pop up a window and it says, do you want to do this and that? Yes or no? Okay, yes, no. Then you stop the whole program and you have to think and make a decision. Then you enter a different mode. The other modes for Blender, like the edit mode. Edit mode is actually bad because you have to keep thinking, am I in edit mode or am I in object mode or am I in face painting mode? And if you once do it wrong, you get stuck and you get frustrated. Lots of new users especially get frustrated by modes. And he tried to find ways how to design the ultimate modeless interface. That's very complicated, but then you can get very fast.
And
You heard about that theory?
yes, is included in something that I didn't show because there was no time. Again, some of these also there's some write on what was proposed radial menu and other kind of menu in the note of this presentation.
So I have a proposal for the different modes in Blender. I've installed a desktop cube Comfits Display Manager on my Linux box. And so what about having 3 Blender windows? And one I'm in the object mode, and then I turn around the whole desktop cube. On the right one I'm in edit mode.
It's fun, it's still modal. But the modal thing is that you have to twist your brain into a button like, and now I have to, when I press A, his philosophy is that whatever you do, that action always does the same thing. If you press a key, it should always do what you want it to do. You don't have to think, oh, when I'm in this mode, the A key will do this, and in that mode it will do that. That's modal. That's complicated, but it's...
It's like the IPO editor and the edit mode. Tab switches. From edit mode to
Yes. What's funny, I think, is that recently we have all those rotating cubes and stuff, but what is becoming increasingly useful is textual search, even in the desktop. So, for example, I don't even use anymore the start menus in the various operating systems, because you have Spotlight on Mac, Deskbar Applet on Linux, and the Vista menu has already textual search. So maybe we could get rid of menus altogether. Just have a textual search button, because you always know, well, sort of, you often know the name of the command that you're looking for. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it can be, function has to be accessible in more than one way. So this can be a way. The thing is that is a recall memory, and it's not recognized in memory. So if you forgot this command and there is in any other part in the textual menu, you won't find it. So it's a plus on the interface.
For example, in Blender, I end up using very much the hotkey script because you can search texture. So you can write, okay, what's the hotkey for that? And you can find it immediately. I think we should explore more of that kind of interaction. Would be nice.
Yeah. You were. Okay. Thank you.
Before we go to the next talk, the whole concept of Blender interfaces, Blender tools, how should Blender work? Tomorrow at 5 o'clock we have an open stage. So everybody who has some kind of piece of software, even when it's Lightwave or Maya, 3D Studio, or 3D programs, come to the front and show some kind of workflow which you think is good, or some option or feature or a modality or whatever which you like. But that's the way to inspire people, to show it. But lots of people have done that in the past and it has helped a lot to analyze why other programs do things well and how we can do that in Blender better. Okay, thank you.